May 23, 1943. The Industrial Club, Avenue de Friedland, Paris. Jeannie Rousseau places her lipstick on the white tablecloth beside her wine glass. The tube gleams under the chandeliers, innocent, feminine, unremarkable. Across from her sit three German officers from the Todt organization, engineers overseeing Hitler's most secret weapons programs. They're drinking too much champagne. They're talking too freely. One of them, a senior engineer named Wachtel, leans forward and sketches something on a napkin. Imagine, he says in German, a pilotless aircraft, no crew to lose, flies itself to the target. We call it the V1. Rousseau smiles, playing the charming interpreter helping French industrialists negotiate with their occupiers. She's 24 years old. She has no training in espionage, no background in engineering, no credentials whatsoever. What she has is perfect German and a photographic memory. She asks innocent questions. How fast will it fly? What's the range? Where are you testing them? The officers laugh, flattered by her attention. Another begins describing something even more extraordinary, a rocket called the V2. 14 meters tall, supersonic, unstoppable by any defense. Peenemünde, one of them says. That's where the magic happens. Rousseau excuses herself to the powder room. Her hands don't shake as she unscrews the base of her lipstick tube. Inside, rolled tight as cigarette paper, is a strip of silk printed with substitution codes. She unrolls it, memorizes every detail the officers revealed, then encodes the intelligence using symbols that look like meaningless doodles. She rolls the silk back inside the lipstick case, applies fresh color to her lips, and returns to the table. What she doesn't know, what none of them knows, is that in London, British intelligence has detected strange signals from the Baltic coast. They suspect the Germans are developing new weapons, but they have no hard evidence, no specifications, no locations. Without confirmation, without technical details, the Allies can't act. And every day, Hitler's scientists work undisturbed at Peenemünde, brings them closer to deploying weapons that could rain destruction on London, killing tens of thousands. Weapons that could change the outcome of the war. The intelligence Rousseau carries in her lipstick tube, memorized, encoded, awaiting transmission, will either save those lives or die with her when the Gestapo inevitably catches the amateur spy posing as an interpreter. What the Germans don't know is that the foolish young woman smiling at them across the table is about to become their greatest nightmare. By mid-1943, the Allied invasion of Europe hangs in the balance, and Hitler has a plan to shatter it before it begins. Since 1939, German scientists at the Peenemünde Army Research Center on the Baltic coast have been developing Vergeltungswaffen, vengeance weapons, specifically designed to terrorize civilians and break British morale. The V1 flying bomb can reach London in 22 minutes carrying a 1,900-pound warhead. The V2 rocket, more terrifying still, travels at 3,500 miles per hour. By the time you hear it coming, you're already dead. British intelligence knows something dangerous is happening on Germany's northern coast. Photo reconnaissance planes have captured images of strange installations. Intercepted radio signals mention special weapons. But photographs alone can't reveal payload capacity, launch rates, or production schedules. They need human intelligence from inside the program. The problem? Getting that intelligence is nearly impossible. By 1943, the Gestapo has shattered multiple Allied spy networks operating in France. The average life expectancy for an intelligence agent in occupied Paris is 6 months. SOE's professional operatives, trained in Scotland, equipped with false papers and cyanide capsules, keep getting rolled up by counterintelligence. The Germans have perfected the art of identifying spies, watching for behavioral tells, monitoring suspected safe houses, torturing captured agents until they reveal their networks. Expert consensus says You need military training to survive behind enemy lines. You need emotional discipline to resist interrogation. You need technical knowledge to recognize valuable intelligence when you see it. The statistics back up the terror. Of the 470 SOE agents inserted into France during the war, 118 will die in concentration camps or firing squads. That's a 25% mortality rate. For wireless operators, the agents who transmit intelligence back to London, the survival rate is even worse. German direction-finding units can triangulate radio signals within minutes. The stakes couldn't be higher. Intelligence estimates suggest that if the V-weapons program deploys at full capacity, London could face 10,000 rocket strikes per month. At 2 to 3 deaths per V2 impact, that's 20,000 to 30,000 casualties monthly. Britain's entire civilian casualty rate for the first year of the Blitz, compressed into 30 days, repeatedly. Churchill's scientific advisor, R.V. Jones, desperately needs someone on the ground who can confirm what the V-weapons actually are, where they're being built, and when deployment will begin. Someone with access to German engineers. Someone they won't suspect. Someone expendable enough that British intelligence is willing to risk them without formal training. Previous attempts have failed catastrophically. In March 1943, intelligence officers tried inserting an agent into the French industrial sector. He was arrested within 2 weeks. In April, they tried recruiting a secretary in the German military administration. The Gestapo exposed her before she transmitted a single message. The Germans aren't stupid. They know the Allies are hunting for information about Peenemünde, and they've locked down security accordingly. The conventional wisdom among Allied intelligence services says that gathering technical intelligence on advanced weapons programs requires trained military officers, people who understand engineering, who can recognize specifications, who won't panic under pressure. But conventional wisdom is failing. By May 1943, Allied invasion planning for D-Day is entering its final phase. If the Germans deploy thousands of V-weapons while Allied forces are landing on exposed beaches, the invasion could turn into a slaughter. Eisenhower needs those weapons delayed, disrupted, or destroyed before June 1944. The clock is ticking. The intelligence gap remains unfilled. And in Paris, a 24-year-old French woman with no espionage training, working as a freelance interpreter, is about to prove that everything the intelligence experts believe about who makes an effective spy is catastrophically wrong. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the one you can see coming. Jeannie Yvonne Rousseau has 0 qualifications for intelligence work. Born April 1, 1919, in Saint-Brieuc, Brittany, she's the daughter of a French foreign ministry official. Comfortable, middle-class background, classical education, utterly unremarkable. No military service, no technical training. Her only notable skill is languages. She speaks German, English, and Spanish fluently, having graduated first in her class from Sciences Po in July 1939. When France fell in 1940, she moved to Dinard with her family. The mayor, a friend of her father's, asked if she'd work as an interpreter between French municipal services and German occupation authorities. She agreed. It seemed like a useful way to help her community navigate the occupation. That's when she noticed something. German officers, drinking in requisitioned hotels, spoke freely around her. They assumed interpreters were furniture, just conduits for translation, politically neutral, intellectually negligible. The casual contempt was absolute. Why would a woman understand military significance anyway? So Rousseau started storing her nuts, as she'd later describe it, memorizing details about troop movements, unit designations, supply complaints. She had no contact with Allied intelligence, no training in what information mattered. She just wrote everything down in small notebooks. certain that someday it might prove useful. Then the Gestapo arrested her. In January 1941, an informant reported suspicious behavior. A French interpreter asking too many questions. They interrogated her for 6 hours. She played dumb, insisted she was merely doing her job, acted terrified and naive. They had no evidence, so they released her with a warning and expelled her from the coastal region. She moved to Paris. In 1941, riding a night train from Paris to Vichy, she met Georges Lamarck. He recognized her from university, where she'd finished first in languages. Lamarck ran an intelligence network called the Druids. He needed agents with perfect German, people who could access information without raising suspicion. "Will you work for me?" he asked. "Yes," Rousseau said. No hesitation, no negotiation, just yes. Lamarck gave her the code name Amniarix, after a Gaulish warrior queen. He arranged a job for her with a business association that supplied materials to German military projects. This positioned her perfectly. French industrialists constantly negotiated with German procurement officers. They needed interpreters. And German officers, confident in their military superiority and cultural assumptions about female intellectual capacity, spoke freely during these meetings. That's how she found herself at the Industrial Club in May 1943, across from Todt Organization engineers, hearing about Peenemünde for the first time. She understood instantly that this intelligence was extraordinary. The officers had revealed weapon specifications, test locations, timelines for deployment. But she had no training in how to remember technical details under pressure. No encryption system for complex numerical data. No secure method for recording and transmitting what she'd learned. That's when she had her moment of insight. If the Germans dismissed her as intellectually negligible, she'd use that blindness. If they believed women only cared about cosmetics and fashion, she'd hide her intelligence work in plain sight. If they assumed feminine accessories were meaningless, she'd make those accessories deadly. She needed something she could carry anywhere without suspicion. Something she could access quickly in a bathroom between courses. Something so obviously innocuous that even the Gestapo wouldn't look twice. She needed lipstick. Rousseau contacts a member of the Druids network who works in precision manufacturing. "I need a lipstick tube," she tells him, "but hollow. I need to hide coded messages inside." He stares at her. "That's insane. If the Germans search you and find that, you're dead." "They won't search me," she says. "They think I'm harmless." The craftsman, his name lost to history, another anonymous hero of the resistance, gets to work. He acquires an expensive lipstick tube from a confiscated black market shipment. Chanel, probably. The kind a fashionable young woman in Paris would carry without attracting suspicion. He machines out the interior, leaving just enough space at the top for actual lipstick, enough to apply color if anyone's watching. The base unscrews, revealing a hollow chamber 9 centimeters long, just wide enough for tightly rolled silk. Meanwhile, a woman in the network who works for a textile printer produces the silk strips, pre-printed substitution codes, letters mapped to symbols, numbers represented by innocuous doodles that look like fashion sketches or shopping lists. If discovered, they appear to be nothing more than a young woman's idle drawings. The first test happens in Rousseau's apartment. She practices encoding a sample message, fictional, technical specifications, random numbers. She times herself. 7 minutes to encode a full page of intelligence. Too slow. The longer she's gone from a meeting, the more suspicious it looks. She practices again. 5 minutes, then 3. She memorizes the substitution patterns until encoding becomes automatic, muscle memory, something she can do even if she's terrified. She practices rolling the silk tight enough to fit in the tube, securing it, screwing the base back on, applying lipstick to her lips to reset the used appearance. 12 seconds for the full operation. Fast enough to do in a restaurant bathroom without raising alarms. Then comes the real test, June 2nd, 1943. Another meeting at the Industrial Club. More German engineers, more champagne, more loose talk about Peenemünde. They describe test launch failures, production bottlenecks, fuel composition challenges. Rousseau excuses herself to the powder room, encodes everything, returns to the table. Nobody notices. The intelligence reaches Georges Lamarck through dead drops and couriers. He transmits it to London via radio operators who risk their lives with every broadcast. And in Britain, R.V. Jones receives a report so detailed, so technically precise, that he initially suspects it's a German deception operation. Who is this source? Jones demands. Amnierix, the intelligence officer tells him, one of the most remarkable young women of her generation. What's her background? Military intelligence? Engineering degree? No, sir. She's 24. She was a university languages student. She works as an interpreter. Jones rereads the report. Specifications for 2 separate weapon systems. Test site coordinates. Estimated production timelines. All obtained from casual dinner conversations. This is impossible, Jones says. Nobody gets this kind of intelligence without technical training. Apparently, the officer replies, someone just did. Jones authorizes aerial reconnaissance of the coordinates Rousseau provided. The photos confirm everything. Peenemünde is real. The V weapons are real, and a French woman with a lipstick tube full of coated silk just gave the Allies their first genuine breakthrough in understanding Hitler's vengeance weapons program. But getting the intelligence is one thing. Acting on it is about to become a bureaucratic nightmare. July 12th, 1943, Cabinet War Rooms, London. R.V. Jones stands before a room full of skeptical military commanders and presents Rousseau's intelligence. She's produced 17 separate reports now, each more detailed than the last. Rocket dimensions, fuel types, guidance systems, production rates, all from conversations with German engineers who apparently viewed dinner with a pretty French interpreter as the perfect opportunity to brag about their technical achievements. This is extraordinary intelligence, Jones says. But I need authorization for a bombing raid on Peenemünde, a massive one. We need to destroy this facility before these weapons become operational. Air Chief Marshal Charles Portal shakes his head. We're committing every available bomber to industrial targets supporting the invasion. You want me to divert 800 heavy bombers to hit a facility on the Baltic coast based on intelligence from a French translator. A remarkably accurate French translator, Jones corrects. Who has no military training, Portal counters. How do we know this isn't a deception operation? The Germans could be feeding her false information intentionally, trying to waste our bomber fleet. Lord Cherwell, Churchill's scientific advisor, leans forward. I've reviewed this intelligence, Prime Minister. Frankly, I'm skeptical. Some of these specifications seem exaggerated. A rocket traveling at 3,500 miles per hour? That defies physics as we understand it. Jones feels the room turning against him. With respect, Lord Cherwell, physics doesn't care about our understanding. The Germans have been developing liquid fuel rockets since 1933. This isn't science fiction. It's science. Based on pillow talk from German engineers, another commander interrupts. That's what this is, isn't it? Your source is batting her eyes at lonely occupation officers, and they're impressing her with war stories. The room erupts. This is irresponsible. We can't commit strategic bombers to... The intelligence is too convenient. Who authorized inserting an untrained civilian? Jones raises his voice above the chaos. Gentlemen, I've spent 3 years tracking German weapons development. This is the first intelligence that explains everything we've been observing. The radio intercepts, the photo reconnaissance anomalies, the fragmentary reports from other sources. Amnierix isn't giving us random information. She's giving us the technical specifications that make sense of data we already have. And if you're wrong, Portal demands, if this is a deception and we waste 800 bombers on a wild goose chase. Before Jones can respond, a voice cuts through from the back of the room. Then I'll take responsibility. Everyone turns. Churchill has entered quietly, standing in the doorway with his trademark cigar. Prime Minister, Portal begins, we weren't expecting. I've read the Amnierix reports, Churchill says, walking to the head of the table. All of them. Either this young woman is the most brilliant intelligence fabrication the Germans have ever created, or she's handing us Hitler's most dangerous secret on a silver platter. Or rather, in a lipstick tube, from what I understand. A few uncomfortable chuckles. Churchill continues. Here's what I know. If these V-weapons deploy before we launch Overlord, the invasion fails. If they deploy after we establish our beachhead, they could still kill tens of thousands of British civilians. Either way, we can't afford to ignore this intelligence. He looks directly at Portal. How soon can you strike Peenemünde? Portal hesitates, then. We'd need 2 weeks to plan the operation. Full moon for visibility. That puts us at August 17th or 18th. Then that's when you'll do it, Churchill says. 600 heavy bombers. Make it the biggest raid in Bomber Command history. I want Peenemünde erased from the map. Prime Minister, Lord Cherwell interjects, if this intelligence proves false, then we'll have wasted bombs, but gained the certainty that the Germans aren't building superweapons. If it's real, and we do nothing, we'll lose the war from London while our armies are stuck on French beaches. The choice is obvious. He turns to Jones. Your source, Amnierix. When this operation concludes, I want her brought to Britain. Anyone brave enough to carry intelligence in a lipstick tube while dining with the enemy deserves better than a Gestapo cell. Jones nods. I'll arrange it, sir. But as the meeting adjourns and plans accelerate for Operation Hydra, the raid on Peenemünde, neither man knows that Rousseau has 8 more months of intelligence work ahead of her. 8 more months of lipstick tubes and dinner conversations and encoded silk strips. 8 more months before the Gestapo finally catches her. If you're finding this story as incredible as we did researching it, do us a favor and hit that like button. There are dozens of untold World War II stories like this, operations that saved thousands of lives but remained classified for decades. We're bringing you a new one every week, but we can only keep doing this if you let us know you want more. Subscribe now and drop a comment telling us which aspect of wartime intelligence you'd like us to cover next. Now, back to what happened when 600 British bombers headed for the Baltic coast. August 17th, 1943, 2147 hours, RAF Bomber Command launches Operation Hydra. 596 heavy bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, Stirlings, take off from airfields across England. They carry 1,137 tons of high explosive and incendiary bombs. Their target, a research facility most of the crews have never heard of, on a coastline most have never seen. Group Captain John Searby, flying as master bomber in a Lancaster from 83 Squadron, orbits Peenemünde at 7,000 feet and can't believe what he sees through the darkness. The intelligence was perfect. Every building marked on their target maps is exactly where Rousseau said it would be. The production halls, the test stands, the liquid oxygen plant, the housing for the scientists and engineers. Main force, this is Master Bomber, Searby radios. Target clearly identified. Commence bombing run. First wave, hit the production hall south of the assembly building. The first 240 bombers strike between 2150 and 2205. High explosive bombs crater runways and test stands, Incendiaries turn wooden support buildings into firestorms. Dr. Walter Thiel, technical director of the V2 program, dies in the attack along with 178 other scientists and engineers. The liquid oxygen plant, critical for rocket fuel production, sustains catastrophic damage. But German night fighters scramble from nearby airfields. Messerschmitt Bf-110s and Focke-Wulf 190s tear into the bomber stream. RAF losses mount. 40 bombers shot down. 291 aircrew killed or captured. It's one of Bomber Command's costliest raids of the war. Yet the damage to Peenemünde is devastating. Post-raid reconnaissance photos, analyzed over the following days, reveal that V2 production has been set back by at least 4 months. Assembly buildings are destroyed. Test equipment irreplaceable. The housing for forced laborers, another 500 dead, means the Germans have lost their workforce. R.V. Jones examines the bomb damage assessment reports and calculates backwards. If Rousseau hadn't provided those specifications, if the raid had never happened, V2 production would have reached operational capacity by December 1943. Instead, the first V2 doesn't strike London until September 8, 1944, a 9-month delay. Those 9 months matter enormously. D-Day launches June 6, 1944. By September, Allied forces have broken out of Normandy and are racing across France. The strategic situation has shifted completely. The V-weapons, designed to break Britain before invasion, now launch against a Britain that's already winning the war. But the intelligence doesn't stop. Rousseau continues meeting with German engineers through late 1943 and into 1944. She learns about backup production facilities, about V-1 launch sites being constructed in northern France, about fuel shortages and guidance system failures. Every detail gets encoded in that lipstick tube, passed through dead drops, transmitted to London. On April 28, 1944, her luck runs out. The Gestapo has been tracking the Druids network for months. They know there's a security leak somewhere in the industrial liaison sector. They've been monitoring interpreters, secretaries, anyone with access to technical conversations. When they cross-reference multiple surveillance reports, one name appears repeatedly: Jeannie Rousseau. They arrest her at La Roche-Derrien. She manages to warn 2 other network members before they take her, probably saving their lives, but hers is effectively over. First, they take her to Jacques Cartier prison in Rennes. The interrogations last weeks. They show her photographs of Peenemünde, the ruins, the bomb craters. "Your intelligence did this," the Gestapo officer says. "Tell us who you're working with. Tell us how you transmitted the information." She tells them nothing, claims she's just an interpreter, insists they've confused her with someone else, plays naive and terrified, which isn't difficult, because she genuinely believes they'll execute her. Instead, in August 1944, as Allied forces close in on Paris, the Germans deport her to Ravensbrück concentration camp. 68 days on a transport train. No food, no water. Women dying around her from dysentery and typhus. Ravensbrück is hell. She survives by organizing secret education classes for other prisoners, teaching them languages, helping them maintain hope. When guards discover this, they transfer her to Königsberg, a punishment camp where conditions are even worse. In February 1945, realizing the war is lost, the Germans transfer her again to Torgau labor camp. She's supposed to work manufacturing ammunition. Instead, she organizes a demonstration, prisoners refusing to make weapons that will kill Allied soldiers. The guards threaten execution, but liberation comes first. April 1945. The Swedish Red Cross negotiates prisoner releases. Rousseau, weighing barely 90 pounds, suffering from tuberculosis contracted in the camps, gets evacuated to Sweden for medical treatment. Meanwhile, V-weapons continue falling on London and Antwerp. The final tally, 6,625 V-1 flying bombs launched at Britain, killing 5,475 people. Another 1,402 V-2 rockets, killing 2,754 civilians. Combined casualties, 8,029 dead, over 22,000 wounded. R.V. Jones does the mathematics. Without the Peenemünde raid, without the delays Rousseau's intelligence enabled, the Germans would have deployed V-weapons at 3 times the actual rate. That means 24,000 deaths instead of 8,000. That's 16,000 lives saved. Conservative estimate. But there's another calculation. If V-weapons had deployed 4 months earlier, they would have struck Allied invasion forces during D-Day buildup in southern England. Ports packed with supply ships, airfields crowded with bombers, concentration of forces unlike anything in military history. The strategic impact of V-weapons hitting those targets could have delayed or disrupted the invasion entirely. How many lives did that save? How many Allied soldiers survived D-Day because German rockets weren't falling on Portsmouth and Southampton during May 1944? Nobody can calculate it precisely. But one number is certain. 17 intelligence reports encoded in a lipstick tube by an untrained 24-year-old woman gave the Allies everything they needed to disrupt Hitler's most dangerous weapons program at the moment when disruption mattered most. By the time German scientists fixed the damage and resumed production, the war had already turned irreversibly against them. Sometimes victory doesn't come from guns or tanks or bombers. Sometimes it comes from a young woman who understood that the most dangerous weapon isn't the one you carry. It's the one nobody thinks to look for. Real quick, we've got 20 more stories like this in production, but YouTube's algorithm only promotes content that gets engagement in the first hour. If you've watched this far, you're exactly the audience we're creating this for. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who appreciates real history over Hollywood fiction. Comments help too. Drop a note about which WB12 intelligence operation we should investigate next. Thanks for watching. Now let's talk about what happened to Jeannie Rousseau after the war. Jeannie Rousseau survives the war, but spends a year in Swedish hospitals recovering from tuberculosis. While convalescing, she meets Henri de Clairon, a French resistance fighter who'd been imprisoned at Buchenwald in Auschwitz. 2 people who'd seen hell, finding each other in the aftermath. They marry, have 2 children, live quietly. She works as a freelance interpreter after the war, United Nations, various international agencies, speaks 7 languages fluently, never mentions her intelligence work, declines every interview request for 50 years. In 1993, R.V. Jones, by then Sir Reginald Victor Jones, legendary British scientific intelligence officer, nominates her for recognition by the CIA. She's one of only a handful of non-Americans ever awarded the agency SEAL medal. At the ceremony, Jones tells the audience, Amnierix's reports stand brilliantly in the history of intelligence. 3 concentration camps could not break her. She provided the technical specifications that allowed us to understand and ultimately defeat Hitler's vengeance weapons. Without her, thousands more would have died. David Ignatius, Washington Post reporter, finally convinces her to give an interview in 1998. He asks what drove her to risk everything. I was storing my nuts, she says simply. I saw information that might be useful. So I stored it. When someone asked if I'd help transmit it to London, I said yes. What else could I do? But you weren't trained for intelligence work, Ignatius presses. You were a civilian translator. Didn't you understand how dangerous it was? She pauses. I knew it was dangerous, but the Germans were doing terrible things. Someone had to do something. Why not me? That quote, "Why not me?" becomes the headline. But what strikes Ignatius most is her absolute ordinariness. This isn't a superhero. This is a woman who happened to speak German, happened to overhear critical intelligence, and happened to have the courage to act when action was desperately needed. France awards her the Legion of Honor in 1955, upgraded to Grand Officer in 2009. She also receives the Resistance Medal and the Croix de Guerre. At each ceremony, she insists the real heroes were the wireless operators who transmitted her intelligence, dozens of whom died when German direction-finding units located their broadcasts. I just listened and remembered, she says. They're the ones who took the real risks. Jeannie Rousseau de Clairant dies August 23, 2017, at age 98. Her obituary in the New York Times runs 4 columns. CIA analysts studying modern tradecraft still examine her techniques, how she exploited enemy assumptions about gender and intellectual capacity, how she used everyday objects to conceal intelligence, how she gathered technical specifications without formal training by simply paying attention and asking intelligent questions. The lipstick tube itself, if it survived, has never been found. Probably discarded in 1944 when the Gestapo arrested her, one more piece of women's cosmetics lost in the chaos of occupation. But the intelligence encoded inside those silk strips? That's preserved forever in British archives. 17 reports that changed the course of the war. Technical specifications that enabled the Peenemünde raid. Warnings that saved thousands of lives. All hidden in plain sight. All carried by a young woman the Germans dismissed as intellectually negligible. R.V. Jones, in his 1978 memoir, Most Secret War, writes, "When I first inquired about the source of the extraordinary report that had tipped us off to Peenemünde, all I learned was that it came from one of the most remarkable young women of her generation. That turned out to be the understatement of the war. The lesson: your most dangerous enemy is the one you're certain doesn't matter." Jeannie Rousseau proved that exceptional intelligence, in both senses of the word, doesn't require credentials, training, or military rank. Sometimes it just requires courage, attention, and a lipstick tube.